On a different issue, in Australia at the moment, we are having unprecedented numbers of migrants coming into the country. We're told it's for the greater economic good. It's a message the Brits have had for many years, with authorities telling them, well, if you want to get your pensions, we need mass migration. How else are we going to afford your pensions? But there's multiple new reports coming out showing that, well, perhaps that's not the case. The Centre for Migration Control has a report out showing British taxpayers have spent £36 billion on jobless legal migrants and international students. And at the same time, the Brits are being told that thanks to an ageing population, they're going to have to retire later and possibly for a smaller pension too. It's all very interesting data, Douglas, in the lead up to an election.
It's damning, of course, for the Conservative government, who promised legal migration in the tens of thousands, which is what it was in the 1990s before Blair opened the gates. They promised to go back to the tens of thousands a year in net migration, and instead we're approaching a million last year in the UK. Of course, most of the people who come, because of the stupid laws that the Conservative Party have had in, instead of prioritising high-skilled workers, they've prioritised low-skilled workers and students. So, of course, do not pay, particularly low-skilled workers, do not pay their way. They are a drain on the state. They take out more in benefits than they put in taxation, and almost certainly always will. As for the idea that that you need to import workers, you need to import migrants because of the people growing older and all this. I mean, the mad thing about this, as I've pointed out for years, is migrants grow old as well. It's an astonishing fact that evades the politicians. And what that means is that you just have an ever-growing population that needs an ever larger migrant push from below in order to sustain the living standards of the aging population. I think it's a very, very inept set of policies we've had. I've written about them for years. I've explained for years why these policies are so wrong-headed. And I'm afraid it's a failure of mine and others. The governments didn't take notice. They didn't act on it. And so we have societal and economic consequences that are going to affect everyone's grandchildren.
It's akin to a pyramid scheme almost, isn't it? Where you just have to keep going, you keep needing to generate that economic activity to pay for the mistakes you've made in the past. Now, finally, I want to ask you about this. I saw this post on X go viral in recent days, highlighting the practice of Arab slavers castrating their male slaves. This shocked social media, but you've written about this in your book, The War on the West. It's incredible how so few of those who are obsessed with slavery and historic racial grievances are completely ignorant of the Arab slave trade and other examples of slavery around the world. How can that be? How can you be so preoccupied with slavery and then be completely ignorant about this?
Well, because they're not preoccupied about slavery, are they, Rita? They're preoccupied about being against the West. That's their simple drive. On issue after issue, whether it's colonialism or slavery or racism or anything else, these people just simply use these things as brickbats to hit the West with. It's no surprise that their so-called research stops at the edges of the West, because they're not interested in critiquing other societies. They're just interested in condemning the West. If people were genuinely interested in the history of slavery, they wouldn't be able to ignore the Arab slave trade, far larger trade than the European slave trade or the American slave trade. They wouldn't be able to ignore it, but they do, because they're not interested in slavery. They're simply interested in attacking Australia, Britain, America, Canada, and Europe. And that's their game. And we just have to see whether or not they get to win that game. I would hope not.
Douglas Murray, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time this evening.